Look at the world around you today, and it seems like nature has drawn a permanent map. We look at the continents and assume that the features, the skin tones, and the faces of the people living there today are the faces that have always been. We have built an entire societal narrative around the concept of the white man as an ancient, native fixture of European continent. But what if everything you think you know about the history of human race is an illusion? What if the pristine white marble of our history books has blinded us to a reality that science is only now beginning to uncover? If you could board a time machine and travel back to Europe just 8,000 years ago, not a long time in the grand scale of human existence, you wouldn't find a continent of fair-skinned, blonde-haired people. Instead, you would walk among humans who possessed dark brown or nearly black skin, paired with striking, brilliant blue eyes. For 99% of our history as a species, all humans were dark-skinned. Whiteness is not an ancient baseline. It is a radical, chaotic, and incredibly recent evolutionary experiment. So, why did our ancestors change? How did the dark-skinned hunters of the ancient world transform into the fair-skinned populations of modern Europe? The answer isn't a story of superiority or clean lines. It is a brutal tale of survival, UV radiation, and an unexpected evolutionary trap. To understand why humans lost their dark skin, we first have to understand why we had it in the first place. Every single piece of genetic and archaeological data we possess points to a single, undeniable truth. We are all children of Africa. For roughly 300,000 years, Homo sapiens evolved under the intense, punishing ultraviolet radiation of the equatorial sun. In this environment, dark skin wasn't a cosmetic trait, it was a biological shield. Our bodies utilize a pigment called melanin. Think of melanin as nature's built-in sunscreen. When the sun beats down on the equatorial savanna, intense UV rays penetrate the skin. Without heavy amounts of eumelanin, the specific pigment that makes skin dark, UV light destroys a crucial nutrient in our bloodstream called folate or vitamin B9. Folate is the currency of human reproduction. If a pregnant woman lacks folate, her child faces severe, often fatal neural tube defects. If a man lacks folate, his fertility plummets. In ancient Africa, having light skin was effectively a genetic death sentence. Melanin protected our ancestors, keeping them healthy, fertile, and strong. For hundreds of thousands of years, to be human was to be dark-skinned. It was the perfect biological blueprint. But humans are inherently restless. Around 50,000 years ago, small bands of hunter-gatherers began to push out of Africa. They crossed into the Middle East, expanded across Asia, and eventually crossed the threshold into Europe. As they moved further north, they encountered an invisible wall. The intense, blinding sunlight of the equator vanished, replaced by the weak, slanted, and overcast skies of northern Europe. Suddenly, the evolutionary math flipped. In places like modern-day Britain, Germany, and Scandinavia, the sun is so weak for most of the year that UV radiation is no longer a threat to your folate levels. Instead, a new, far more terrifying problem emerged: a lack of vitamin D. Our bodies require UV light to trigger the synthesis of vitamin D in our skin. Vitamin D is not an optional luxury. It regulates our immune systems, protects our hearts, and most importantly, allows our bones to absorb calcium. Without it, children develop rickets, an agonizing disease that bends and deforms the skeleton, making childbirth impossible for women and hunting impossible for men. In the gloomy, low-light environment of the North, dark skin became too good at its job. It blocked the tiny amount of available sunlight entirely. The biological shield had become a prison. For a long time, historians assumed that as soon as humans walked into Europe, they immediately turned white to adapt to this low light. But in 2018, geneticists at the Natural History Museum in London shattered this myth entirely when they sequenced the DNA of Cheddar Man, a 10,000-year-old skeleton found in Somerset, England. The results sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Cheddar Man had markers for dark brown or black skin, dark curly hair, but strikingly bright blue eyes. And he wasn't an anomaly. Across Spain, Luxembourg, Germany, and the Balkans, Western hunter-gatherers of the Mesolithic era shows the exact same profile: dark skin, blue eyes. This leaves us with a massive evolutionary paradox. If these ancient Europeans lived in low-light Europe for over 30,000 years, why were they still dark-skinned? Why hadn't they turned white? The answer lies in what they ate. These ancient Europeans didn't need to synthesize vitamin D from the sun because they were living off the fat of the land. They ate red deer, wild boar, freshwater fish, and marine mammals, foods that are naturally bursting with massive quantities of vitamin D. Because their diet bypassed the sun entirely, there was no evolutionary pressure on their skin to change. They remained dark, healthy, and perfectly adapted for millennia. So, what broke the cycle? What forced the dramatic transformation? The trigger for white skin wasn't a change in the weather. It was a change in our diets. Around 8,000 years ago, as we explored in our video on the Balkan paradox, agriculture swept into Europe from Anatolia. Humans stopped hunting wild animals and started farming wheat, barley, and peas. They settled into permanent villages. Within a few generations, the diverse, nutrient-rich diet of the hunter-gatherer vanished. It was replaced by a monotonous, grain-heavy diet, and grains contain virtually zero vitamin D. Suddenly, the primary source of this vital nutrient was cut off. Early European farmers became severely deficient. Their bones began to soften, their teeth rotted, and their health plummeted. Nature was forcing a brutal choice: adapt or go extinct. This is the exact moment the genetic mutations for white skin went from a rare anomaly to an absolute survival necessity. Two specific genes, SLC24A5 and SLC45A2, began to sweep across the European continent. These genes effectively dialed down the production of melanin, stripping the pigment from the skin. A lighter skin tone allowed these early farmers to absorb up to 6 times more UV radiation from the weak northern sun than their dark-skinned ancestors. Whiteness was an emergency biological adaptation to survive a self-inflicted dietary crisis. It was the price humans paid to eat bread. But the story wasn't finished. Early European farmers were lighter than the hunter-gatherers, but they weren't yet the fair-skinned, blonde-haired populations we recognize today. The final ingredient in the genetic puzzle arrived roughly 5,000 years ago from the harsh, wind-swept steppes of modern-day Ukraine and Russia. A nomadic pastoralist people known as the Yamna, swept into Europe on horses, bringing with them bronze weapons, wheeled carts, and the Indo-European languages that dominate the continent today. The Yamna brought something else in their bloodline, the gene variant for high height, robust bones, and a massive influx of mutations for even lighter skin and blonde hair. When the Yamna mixed with the indigenous European farmers, the modern European genetic profile was truly born. What we think of today as the white man is actually a highly complex 3-part genetic cocktail, a mixture of dark-skinned, blue-eyed indigenous hunters, light-skinned Anatolian farmers, and fair-haired pastoralists from the Russian steppe. It took tens of thousands of years of migration, conflict, and dietary collapse to stitch these faces together. When we look back across the deep ocean of human time, we begin to realize that skin color is not a badge of identity, a marker of culture, or a baseline of human division. It is simply a highly flexible, temporary biological response to geography and diet. For 300,000 years we were dark. For a brief, chaotic sliver of time, some of us became light. And today we spend our lives locked into artificial structures, working in cubicles under fluorescent lights, buying vitamin D supplements at grocery stores, and stressing over racial constructs that nature never intended to be permanent. We invented jobs, we invented schedules, and we invented races to categorize ourselves. But beneath the thin layer of melanin that separates us, our bones tell the exact same story. We are all travelers who walked out of the same African sun, trying to survive the world we built. Next time you look in the mirror, look past the color of your skin and look into your eyes, because the eyes of the ancient world are still looking back at you. Thanks for watching, and remember to ask yourself, is anyone watching?